Michael's wearing a plastic G-Shock and I'm wearing a vintage JLC. Needless to say, watches say something about you. In fact, they speak volumes. So today, we're going to be talking about exactly what watches do say about you. We're going to look at collectors from beginner all the way up to expert.
Insane watches you've never seen before.
Let's do it. What is up, Watch fam? I am Christian, the curator of the Theo and Harris Vintage Watch Shop.
My name is Michael, and by the way, I'm not just wearing any G-Shock. It says a lot more about me. This is a DW5000 solar, tough solar, amazing watch.
Yeah.
What do you think it says about me?
What does that watch say about you? That watch says that you're really just a good guy on the inside, despite the fact that you're generally dirty. No,
very greasy.
No, it's funny. We both have similar G-Shocks.
Yeah.
And I don't think that your G-Shock says a crazy amount, right? It's a fairly simple, right, just good, reliable watch. I happen to know that you have a life that you're always moving shit, so G-Shocks make a lot of practical sense at work. But what it says right now that you show up to do the video, and it says you really like watches, you know that you're a G-Shock guy, and you're not trying to impress the other person here.
Remember when that was when I first got on the channel, I wore a G-Shock and a hoodie, and it just was so far off with Theo and Harris that they're like, look at this guy. I was like, oh, geez.
I'm wearing a vintage JLC with a beautiful black dial.
Yes.
I've bought and sold these watches at any opportunity I possibly could over the last 8 years. These are incredible watches. This watch is available in the Theo and Harris Vintage Watch Shop. You're not going to get much better than vintage JLC like this.
That's what it says about you, really. You know what you're looking for, and you have great taste.
Thank you very much. I have a sweet strap, too. It's kind of fun, right?
Oh, yeah. That's an amazing watch. The hands on that watch.
Yeah. So watches speak volumes about you, both good and bad, right? Sometimes.
Yeah.
That being said, today we kind of outlined this collector journey, right? What we're very used to seeing on in the beginner levels, and then where watch collecting often does kind of lead inevitably if you have unlimited bank book.
Yes.
So it's a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we are going through 5 categories from beginner to historian to vintage nerd, like the guy that surpasses it, to absolutely unattainable watches. One watch I really want. I think it is the grossest, creepiest looking alien watch, but it's really cool.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about it at the end. Cool. But first, we start off at the beginner stage. All of these, no matter if you're beginner to advanced, are good watches, by the way. This could be a recommendation list.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're not really putting a lot of mistakes in this. Mistakes are common, and we can go into that in a separate video. But this is really just kind of like to say best case scenario is a little bit much, but just a really healthy collection evolution. So today's that's what we're kind of hitting on.
Number 1, the best deal in watches, the Tissot PRX Digital.
Oh my gosh. So sorry about that, guys.
Sorry about it.
In a recent video, Michael and I gave a glowing review to a watch that we absolutely still stand behind. People dislike it, and that's just fine and well and good.
You almost lost the entire business over it.
I did. People really wanted to kill me. I almost lost my life. Thank God I was in Paris. But this is a Tissot PRX. This is not a digital. This is the automatic?
This is the automatic.
Yep. Please.
I chose the white, smaller one, which I think 35 millimeters. This is, like you said, it's not the most common choice out of the PRX line. You would have gone with something else. Yeah, I would go with like the blue or the green. When I see those watches, I really, really love them. I think that, I see them fairly often now. I mean, they're pretty common. And what's kind of wild is, we're seeing them on wrists of people that aren't necessarily watch geeks, right? Which means that regular people that do not obsess over this hobby, are spending $450 on a watch. That's not insignificant, right? I mean, especially like, and I have to really take a much larger bird's eye kind of view about this, but what are the other consumer habits of all those people? This is not superfluous spending. This is not conspicuous consumption. This is just this is a really good watch, and I think that watches are worth $450. We wouldn't have guessed that happening 5 years ago or 8 years ago. It was Daniel Wellington. It was a piece of shit $100 watch. We're doing a video about this later. The exact point of the entire watch world, fantastically, is going back to its roots.
100%.
Which is a very weird thing to be happening in 2023.
It is. So that's a great watch. The next one you've got here is a watch. I would take the PRX over this, but this is a classic entry-level watch.
I don't want to say what watch this is till the end. I'm going to see if they can figure it out.
Okay.
The hands don't fit the watch. Agree or disagree?
I agree. I agree.
And why?
Why do I agree? I just think that historically speaking, these hands, which are I think they're called cathedral hands, are more often featured on these super vintage 1920s. I mean, these hands were these hands went out of style once 1940 hit. Like that was.
I would say these don't even fit on dress watches. These don't fit on pilots' watches. These don't fit on. I don't know any maker that's actually using them besides.
They're a weird hand.
They're incredibly weird. And I think, as this is an incredibly popular watch, there's 2 models of it, I would go so far to say that it would get maybe exponentially more popular if it had better hands. If it had the same hands as the Hamilton Pilot Pioneer, one of my favorite watches right now.
Right. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I mean, I could definitely see a scenario in which these cathedral hands are, to some people, because they're so interesting and different, they are attractive and they make the watch worth buying. I could see that. But for me and for you, just the fact that those hands are so specifically ornate and of a particular era, and they're out of context here, it's a little bit weird. The watch is...
this one specifically is the Seiko Baby Alpinist, SPB 155, 157, 159.
It's just a little baby.
It's just a little baby. They're like, oh, is it a smaller size or something? Like, no, it's for people that can't wear the big one. That being said, the hands are weird, but I like the watch so much that I would get it. Everybody was always like, well, why don't you get it? Well, because I have a lot of watches.
Right.
But I still like that watch a lot.
Right. Well, what I always say to avoid that question.
The Google guy.
Yes, Google guy. No, what I always say to people, like, do you really like this watch? Do you recommend it? Would you buy it? And I say, I would recommend my father bought it. Yes. I recommend my cousin bought it.
Right.
I'm not going to buy it. Right?
Yeah.
That's just a matter of taste. I would recommend that someone who I love and trust about their best interest own this watch. And that's a good watch.
That's a good way of saying it.
Yes. I have a good way with words.
What can I say? I got a new cologne that smells it. I see you can't. You don't have a sense of smell.
Dude. Fucking outing me? Why are you outing me? I can't
What?
smell. By the way, guys, I was born with a condition called anosmia, and it is really up and it is really sad. Thank God I am able to cash disability checks because of it. I get $2,400 a month because of that I can't smell. So it's a public
Burns off in the G-Wagon.
Yeah, so that's the only silver lining here. But if I didn't get that, I'd probably be annoyed about it.
Well, otherwise I wouldn't be able to cover the gas.
Right, exactly.
I got a cologne that smells fantastic. It's one of the best smelling colognes I've ever smelled. And it frustrates Taylor because people compliment me on it a lot. And I usually will be like, oh, thank you. But now I say, I know. She's like, just say thank you. Stop saying, I know I smell good. I'm like, I'm not saying I smell good.
What is the cologne? Are you gatekeeping it?
Oh, I could gatekeep it.
Whisper it in my ear. I could never spell that, so it wouldn't even matter. You might as well be gatekeeping it.
People are like, what was it called? I was like, John Smith 41. Next up, and last on this list, the beginner list, Christopher Ward C65 Aquitaine. Aquitaine automatic. The C65 line in general, Christopher Ward's amazing. In college, I had like 3 or 4 Christopher Wards.
Yep.
Killer watches, killer brand.
Yep. I love this watch. Christopher Ward, listen, there's a whole world of micro brands or independent brands that are delivering disproportionate value. Christopher Ward happens to be one of them that's become really, really popular. They've actually kind of become like the standard of care, basically for this category of watch. This is a particularly beautiful watch. I love one thing to point out here is I love the bezel insert.
Yes.
We see a lot of aluminum bezel inserts. We see a lot of ceramic bezel inserts. And, like Rolexes have ceramic bezel inserts, or Cerachrom, which is Rolex proprietary ceramic mix. But the point that I'm trying to illustrate is ceramic, while beautiful in and of its own right, doesn't have the dimensionality that this is a sapphire has. Sapphire has an actual bend, has a curve to the to the bezel insert, so it gives the whole watch like, I guess, more layers in a way, more depth.
And it's like
beautiful.
The original Rolex had Bakelite on the GMT. It's like that finally works.
Exactly. And we're doing a whole episode on that next. So stay tuned and subscribe to this channel for our Rolex expose conversation.
Because you probably can't get one.
There's an insane Rolex thing going on I want to talk about.
Next up, the YouTube nerd. This is the guy that is watching Theon Harris, watching all these other YouTube channels, everything like that. these are the watches that are disproportionately recommended on YouTube. And why is that?
Yes, well, they're great watches. So YouTubers like ourselves have no problem recommending them because they are good.
Yes.
That being said, YouTubers are incentivized to talk about a certain handful of topics and buzzwords and titles because you are rewarded, right, with views if you do that. So we end up chasing the views and talking about things that you've talked about before, if you haven't noticed. We try to keep it original and fresh and yada yada yada, but we are always chasing, right? It's just the nature of the beast. And the first example here is the Zodiac Seawolf is one of the world's first dive watches with a bidirectional bezel. This back to the 1950s, I think 1953, 4, something like that. Around the same time as Rolex's Submariner and Blancpain's 50 Fathoms. Very historically important watch. They had a revival in the last 10 years, I believe, where they've released a multitude of versions and colors.
Crazy colors, crazy loud colors.
The one you picked out here is a little bit more, down the middle.
Straight,
more of like a sub kind of comp, if you want to put it that way.
Yep.
But the colors get wild. I love this watch. The new ones are not as good as the vintage ones. The proportions are a little bit off. The lugs are a little bit long.
Yeah.
But they're still fantastic watches, and I highly recommend them.
Was it bidirectional? Zodiac Seawolf?
Are they only uni?
I don't know. Well, that's
maybe
the
uni.
They
move.
Yeah, they move. You're not using it for that reason. Next up, this is, honestly, this whole list should be Rolex because that's what everybody talks about on YouTube. But next up, I feel like this is what cemented Tudor as a watch brand that will just get an incredible amount of YouTubers talking and moving because everybody clicks on it.
Yep.
Tudor, specifically, I feel like everything changed with the Tudor Black Bay 54.
Yep.
And that year in general, because that was the year it seemed like Tudor really listened to what people were saying online. So this just exploded, but Tudor Black Bay 54, fantastic watch. Can't go wrong with it.
Yeah, it's a great watch. I love virtually everything about that watch. The size, proportions, the lugs, the gilt dial. I mean, Tudor knocked it out of the park. I love Tudor. I mean, I don't have one, but I love them. I recommend them all the time.
Yeah. Next up, you and I recently went to Germany, and one day I'll tell you the story about how, I guess just tell you right now, there was honey. We were in a beekeeper's apartment on the 3rd floor, and it was super early in the morning, super humid outside.
Oh, that's right.
And the day before, the floors were sticky, and Christian and I were like, oh my God, there's so much like bee whatever on the ground.
And I was like, yeah, it's bee whatever.
So the next day, it's really humid outside. Christian and I are going downstairs early in the morning. We haven't really met the people that know most yet. And I am saying out loud, wow, it's really humid. And as I say that, the bee sticky stuff turned into slippery stuff. I fall down the stairs.
Down all the honey.
And the last thing I see is your face like this. Because you realize I'm coming towards you. So Christian starts running down, one hand on the railing, trying to outpace me as I'm falling down the stairs.
Some friends run toward the fallen friend. Other friends run away from the honey-covered friend.
I'm also covered in honey. I'm eating out of a big pot.
We talked a little bit about this engagement in Germany pretty recently on a special episode of The Zero. The Zero is our podcast community. The link is down below. It's an amazing community. We do podcasts weekly with watch experts, and we talk about things that we generally wouldn't talk about so much on YouTube, things that are a little bit more nuanced. And
it's the whole thing. Everybody clicks on these brands, you can talk about anything in a different
Exactly. So there's weekly podcasts. We do live chats every month. I'm actually doing one tomorrow night, which is going to be great, where all of you folks submit your questions and we chat about watches from 7:30 to 8:30 over a couple of drinks on a Tuesday. What the hell? Not so bad.
No.
So if you'd like to become a member of The Zero, go down below into the link, click. You can even do a 7-day free trial. And if you do decide to sign up, it's not free, but we give out so much in-store credit to the Theo and Harris shop that you're getting free stuff, and it really does pay for itself. The membership is functionally free over the year. So I highly recommend that you go and check it out if you love watches. And if you do join, go ahead and shoot me a DM so we can, chat up a storm, and that's it.
Chat it out.
It's beautiful. We'll talk about it later. Okay, so this is a great watch. A little bit more of a deep cut. Nomos as a brand is, I think, more popular in Europe than it is here. Dramatically.
Yeah. In Germany, especially.
But it's getting better and better by the year in America, in large part due to YouTube, right? Due to the YouTube, world recognizing and giving credit where it's due to this great brand, and that is a great piece.
This is the Club Sport Neomatic Petrol. This is the watch that I wore that whole week, that I was wearing as I fell down the stairs.
Yes.
Survived fine.
If you see that watch on someone's wrist in America, you can go up to them and talk about watches with them. Like they know about watches. It's
100%.
not like a sub where they could just be like, dude, get your hands off my watch.
Exactly. Amazing watch. Highly recommend it. Next up, very similar to the Explorer, but also very similar to the Longines. I mean, the Nomos that we just showed. This is the Longines Spirit. I did 37 millimeters. Highly underrated watch.
It's a fantastic watch. This is one of the greatest watches under $5,000, and it's well under $5,000. The build quality is incredible. Everything from case to bracelet, literally everything is great about this watch. The date execution is great. The dial is just this deep, gorgeous blue. I think the best thing about these Longines Spirit watches is the layers on the dial. There's so many levels to this watch. Visually, it's just fantastic. I hate to say it again, but I recommend this watch to literally anybody with a pulse.
It is a fantastic watch, truly. And the second hand is beautiful.
It really is.
The end of the second hands lines up with the indice, like in front of the number. Perfect.
And the history behind the Longines brand is amazing. They're a corporate partner of ours, so we do a lot of work with them, and that's all well and good. But we really are proud to, right? It's be affiliated with a brand with such history and such just importance is like it's wild. They have literally been important for as long as watches have existed. Basically, in modern history.
Truly, yeah.
It's wild. So, yeah, love Longines.
Yeah, agreed. Next up, intermediate level collector to nerd level historian.
Yep.
This is a person that goes for deep cuts. This is a person that is sick of status quo.
Yep.
Not the ultimate version of that.
Yep.
But here we start to get into some crazy watches, some historical watches, and the rarer version of most brands that you find.
Agreed. What's interesting, and the first watch you've got here is a really good example. This is, you could talk about it for a second.
This is the Omega Marine chronometer, not the Omega Marine, the first ever watch that could be submerged in water. This is the first quartz wristwatch ever to be awarded certified status as a marine chronometer, and this watch is massive. But beautiful.
Well, I think that's therein lies the point, right? And this is the entry level historian. So the guy that's really getting into watches, but he's new to being really into watches. He's not new to watches, but he's new to being really into it. He's starting to put his money where his mouth is and buy interesting, weird stuff, right? That's great. But what's funny is this watch is actually a perfect example of this because when you're first starting to get really into watches, you're ready to you look for things that folks aren't really looking at. And your collection is representative of your research and like, wow, this is on a factual level, this is really interesting. I really like it.
Right.
Exactly. That's where you are, and then you get a little bit later on into the serious watch collecting world, and you're like, yeah, it's very cool on paper. It's just way too big, so it's not.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why it stays underrated.
Exactly.
That's why people don't have it.
Some things there's a reason they're underrated.
Exactly.
That is a great watch. It is underrated, but still very hard to wear.
Next up, there's one in the shop right now, the Theo and Harris Watch Shop, where you source watches that you love, and straps, and there's still some wallets, or the wallets?
Yeah, there's some wallets, but some watch rolls as well. The Theo and Harris Shop is a great place. Definitely go ahead and check it out. I personally curate. I love that verb. All of everything from the watches to the straps and everything. But the watch we're talking about here is actually one of Michael's favorite watches of all time. It's an Omega 321 chronograph, and the 321 movement is one of the most important chronographs of really history, frankly,
truly,
manufactured in the 20th century. It is the movement that powered the Speedmaster that went to the moon, so it was approved by NASA. But the wild part is, like you kind of always say, it's like the 321 is the best, and everyone wants a 321.
In a Speedmaster.
Right. But on very rare occasion, Omega actually manufactured them in Seamasters as well. And they're more elegant, and they're just beautiful, and they're so detailed, and God, they're just amazing watches.
They're fantastic. So the nerd level of this is you want a 321 movement, but you get an Omega with a 321 movement that is not the Speedmaster.
Right.
They do it in the DeVille line. They do it in the Seamaster line, like you said. Bunch of beautiful things. And the practicalness of that for me is, like I said, I would always want like a small Patek chronograph. It's not practical to pay that much when you can get this watch, which fits that exact bill for me.
But that puts you into that beginner historian, right? Because sometimes the beginners are right? Because they're not entrenched in a lot of the kind of bullshit, right? That watch, you're 100% right, is in many ways kind of like Patek calm.
We're both trying not to say poor man's Patek.
Right. It's a ridiculous thing to say, but it's so true. It's an elegantly sized, manually wound chronograph with perfect proportion and heavy detailing from the middle of the 20th century.
With an incredibly famous movement.
Right. It was an incredibly famous movement. And again, it's that balance of the function, the chronograph, with the elegance of the execution. Not a lot of brands did that. That Patek is the most famous for having done it, right? So this fits the bill. I have it paired on a suede strap in the shop right now, and it's amazing. And I think that's for most people.
Yeah.
To make it a real like Patek comp, you put on a thin alligator strap, and it's just like it just becomes an insane watch. I just think that most people prefer the suede, which is why I paired it there. But I love the alligator. Everyone knows that.
That's crazy. Not that opinion, of course. That's totally fine. Next up. This one, last time we did this, before the audio recording got corrupted, we figured out why it's called this. This is a Rolex Oyster Perpetual date 1500, but it is not typically what you see.
Yes. What's special about this watch is the finish. This is a factory finish called Florentine, and I don't know why it's called Florentine.
Do you remember our theory?
Well, yeah, I wanted you to tee it up. We're just recreating it.
Okay. All right, we're faking our reactions. Florentine, Florence, Italy, leather, type of leather, cross-hatched leather with a heavy finish over it, or what is that? That leather called?
This isn't.
It begins with an S.
It's called Saffiano.
Yes, Saffiano. Yeah. Something reminiscent of that. I feel like it took that path. This is not based after Saffiano leather, but that heavily etched finished leather.
You're totally right.
Boom.
That theory is dead on. It's a weird watch. It's an interesting watch. It's a little polarizing. It's something that 5 years ago wasn't popular at all.
Yeah.
And it's still not over the top. But I do think you'll see more and more people warming up to it, because finding a Rolex that is interesting and special and individual is very difficult. Just the other day, I posted a whole article on the Zero on our podcast community about personalized Rolexes, for lack of a better term, and the really tricky world of that, right?
Yeah.
It's very normal and very human to very watch collector-y to want a Rolex, of course. It's also very normal and very human to want something a little bit different, right? We all want to differentiate ourselves once we get to a certain point in our maturation. But oftentimes, well, not oftentimes, different doesn't mean better or even as good. And there's finding that funny little balance between individuality and tastefulness. And I'm interested to see where you guys fall on the Florentine. I happen to think that,
or even the bark dials.
It's on the bark dials as well.
Watch.
I happen to think that this, more than the bark, falls on the tasteful end. But anyway, there was a whole conversation we had on the Zero, so go ahead and sign up again.
Last one on this list before we get to the ideal watch collector, the regular dude. The dude that spends more time with his family than on eBay looking for vintage deals. That's next. But before we get there, one of the greatest watches of all time for this level is the Cartier tank, or the Cartier Must-Stay tank line from the 70s,
I believe so.
Manual wound movement. It's a...
Sometimes quartz, yes.
It's a plated watch, but beneath it, sterling silver, vermeil. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, the vermeil was I think their proprietary term for the technology.
Oh, okay, got it. But not just a white dial, a black dial. That is where things get different. And this might be next level, but there are two types of backs on Cartier tanks. One makes the watch significantly heavier than the other.
Yeah.
So you look for the heavy back one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually didn't even know that until the last episode when Michael and I were talking about it. But these are some of the greatest.
It's not the first time we did this video.
Yeah, these are some of they're really great. They're really great watches, right? Cartier had a lot of fun with these watches. At the time, these were their approachable tanks as opposed to the Louis, which was more expensive. But they had fun with them. They made different colors. These in black and in other colors exist. They're hard to get, but they exist. You can get them. Whereas a Louis with anything different is ungettable.
Truly.
Even a Louis
Impossible.
normal is hard to get, right?
Yeah.
A Louis with a black dial would be, it wouldn't be priceless, but it would be worth just... $100,000. I mean, it's like ridiculous.
Exactly.
It's not 100,000. It's insane money,
Do you remember the wood ones? Wood Cartier.
I remember those. Yeah. Bizarre.
When I was flipping watches, those bombed. I bought 4 because I was like, these are nuts. Everybody's gonna love these.
Nope.
Bombed.
Sometimes different isn't better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And because so many of these were made and they're not in solid yellow gold, they haven't blown up in price like other Cartier tanks or other watches in general.
Essentially all Cartiers right now.
Exactly. Watches that have gone up from basically $5,000 and $10,000 in the last 10 years up into the 50s and hundreds and in some cases over $1 million. It's actually insane. Those watches are now completely gone. The ship has sailed, right? You can no longer reasonably afford those watches. That doesn't mean that they're bad investments though, but they're just kind of totally unaffordable, right? The only way that you could possibly afford one is if, there were a company that was basically democratizing the watch investment space, right?
You and I could both go in on a watch.
Exactly. It doesn't exist here, but it does exist in the art world. The friends over at Masterworks who are enabling the entire world to engage in fractional ownership of collectible art. It's incredible.
Yeah, in fact, Goldman Sachs and BlackRock both say the days of Tina, there is no alternative, are over. RIA reports 88% of surveyed advisors intend to increase allocations to alternatives over the next 2 years, with over half raising allocations all the way to 15%.
Yeah, it's amazing. You cannot ignore these emerging sectors. And frankly, the art market is not per se an emerging market. It's a tried and true market for years now. And it's far, far older and more established in the watch industry. I mean, really? and when you're dealing with the big names, and Masterworks is only dealing with the big names in art, like Picasso and like Banksy.
Banksy, Monet.
You're dealing in what is basically blue chip, right? So that's what Masterworks does, and I think it's incredible.
Yeah, and in 2022, the big three auction houses posted record high revenues of a combined $17.7 billion, the best auction year ever. And more specifically with Masterworks, they just exited their 16th sale a few weeks ago, delivering another double-digit net return to everyday investors who didn't need millions, it's democratized, or art expertise. They handled that as well.
Yep.
So, with all that being said, Masterworks now has over 800,000 users and $940 million under management. Offerings have sold out in minutes, but our subscribers, our followers, can skip the waitlist for Masterworks by using our link in the description.
Sounds terrific. I highly recommend you guys do that, and thank you to Masterworks.
Yeah, thanks for the sponsor. Okay, the regular dude. This is a dude we described as a guy that goes to the JLC store and doesn't know that they recently raised their prices 40%.
This is a guy that admires watches from a distance, likes watches, sure, but has no idea what's like. There's no interest, rather, in what's going on in the world of watches in a very serious way. He's probably not watching this video right now, and if he is, he's saying, which one's Theo, which one's Harris?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I fundamentally don't understand what's going on.
Exactly. So that guy, this is the guy that goes into an AD and comes out with a watch.
Yeah.
This is the guy that sees something in a mall he likes and comes out with a watch.
Mm-hmm.
That guy always, for some reason, has the same watch. He always ends up on the first watch. It is a legendary watch. It is underrated in this space.
Yep.
But a beautiful watch. What watch is it?
It's IWC, Mark whatever.
Mark line.
Yes,
Mark
absolutely.
20, Mark 18.
And it's funny because I have many people that I know on the periphery that have done this. I've seen it out a lot, and a friend of ours actually has one, John. And it's so true. The Mark line is something that is really appreciated by real watch collectors.
Sure.
In like their vintage iterations, right? They're some of the most significant, military watches of all time. But then, for whatever reason, in a lot of the collector community, you don't see them as often. But the truth is, they are, maybe you don't see them as often because people, like, there's no hype to be chased there. Maybe that's why, right? So much of the collector community is always trying to chase and one up and one up and one up. And what happens then is you often forget the simple pleasures, right? Like, it's like Ratatouille, right? Did you see that movie?
No.
It's like you're always chasing haute cuisine, but a simple, Provençal home dish of tomatoes and vegetables is actually very, very good.
Yeah,
It's the best,
It's the whole you come back around at the end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what this is. If you don't know these watches, explore the collection. They're great on straps. They're great. But on bracelets, they're just otherworldly. The bracelets are some of the best in class, period. And these are great watches.
Unbelievable. Yep. Then, of course, we have the Submariner. No need to really even go over that. But finally, I've been to a few ADs in my lifetime, obviously. Mm-hmm. And Zenith doesn't get a lot of talk on YouTube. But whenever I go to an AD, I feel like it's first thing you bump into.
Yep.
When I went into an AD last time, it was the first display case. Mm-hmm. And when the salesman came over, he was like, "Oh, have you looked at Zenith, by the way?"
Yeah.
And I feel like that's when you see a guy with a Chronomaster Original or Rival Shadow or something like that, not knowing what he has, but just thinking like, "Oh, it's a beautiful watch. I heard the name before."
Right.
Absolutely fantastic.
Agreed.
Some of the best designs for smaller wrists, too.
Yeah, I agree. Again, Zenith is a wildly underrated brand that we really, really love. Yeah, I mean, you've been a big fan of Zenith for a while.
Yes.
You know, I've been a fan of Zenith from a distance. I've never owned a Zenith or modern Zenith, rather, but I really love them, particularly their Defy collection, like their blue ceramic stuff, and they're amazing. The watch on your wrist, unlike your iPad, will mean something to someone one day if it doesn't already. Something that will make them smile, walk a little taller, surely at some point cry, but it will mean something.
Next up, Advanced Vintage Nerd. This is the vintage nerd that now goes beyond practicality. He understands that he's not buying the most reliable watches,
Right.
But he does get some of the most unique watches, and he does the worst thing, which you do to me sometimes, especially that doctor's watch you have, where you're wearing a watch that I've seen thousands of times online and never thought about purchasing it, and then you see it on someone's wrist, and you're like,
Yeah.
like he got it first.
100%. And a lot of the reason that advanced vintage nerd, a lot of the reason, what explains that exact phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
Is those great watches, like my Hamilton, doctor's watch, they're really great value. They're great, but they're still thousands of dollars. So it's $2,000, right?
Right.
But it's still like, it's enough money where you're not just going to be like, oh, it's a no-brainer, purchase. Right?
Right.
If it was $500,
No, it's not the brand that I would connotate with
why
this.
isn't this watch? Why don't I own this watch? There's got to be a reason. Is it because it's a Hamilton?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Whereas the guy that's been in this, for a while, and Michael and I have been into watches for just equally as long.
Yeah.
But I've just purchased more just because by virtue of the business, right?
Yeah, of course.
So that's the only reason. But that is, that trains that muscle of like, oh, that just makes sense. Okay, good, bye.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful watch. People aren't buying it for this reason. I know exactly why, and I will get it.
I wear that watch not that often, as you know, and I think it's one of the coolest watches in my collection. I won't sell it, and every once in a while, I'm like, maybe I'll sell that watch. I don't wear it. What am I doing with it? I don't wear it. It's a Hamilton.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I say to myself, like, you love this watch. This is a great watch, and what the f- are you going to do with the $2,000?
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
You're not going to save the business. You know what I mean?
That's not the next time we put out a CISO PRX digital take. That's not what's going to change.
Right.
Anything.
Exactly.
It is also a watch that I feel like every watch nerd has my reaction where they're like, oh, wow, what kind of watch is that again?
Exactly. There's also a beautiful point at this level of watch collecting. It's actually not true. This level, any level of watch collecting, but this level in particular can go one of two ways. Michael and I are hopeless romantics, and we're just kind of a little romantic,
Sure. Yeah.
And in this stage, we're like, oh, dude, isn't this so cool? Like, this is great. I really love this, and it can manifest in a very healthy, way. And then the other way it can obviously go is like this manic, always need to one up kind of thing, which we just don't like. But like wearing a Hamilton is a good example, and for the matter, one of the watches you're going to talk about in a second, a really good example, because no one on the street is going to be like, oh, that's a cool watch. He's wearing a Hamilton. Only going to get credit from watch guys.
Yep.
No one else is going to care, right? Whereas when you're wearing, a gold sub, everyone cares.
Exactly.
But watch guys, it's like,
That's true.
but the rest of the world cares. I know when I'm going to go out with her to on a meeting, which is where I wear a generally conservative watch, or on a date, which is when I only wear yellow gold. I know. Like, what watch am I? I'm gonna wear either a Piaget or my Cartier Gal B.
Right.
That's about it.
Exactly.
Right, because it's cool. It's like very 80s and retro.
Yep.
It's stylistic, but they're definitely gonna notice that this is a cool.
It's just solid gold.
I'm not. If I wear my white gold GMT,
It's
how
useless at that
it's
point.
useless. How are they gonna know? How are they gonna know?
You're like, this is just, it's really.
I'm like, oh god, is your arm tired?
She's like, no, why? It's a steel watch. You're like,
Actually,
it's not. See, this fork is steel. If I ding it against the table, you can hear it. This is the epitome. This watch that I'm showing you right here. This is a watch that I have scrolled by for years.
Yes.
And then Goldberger posted a pic. What's his real name?
Aro Montanari.
He posted a picture of a white gold one with an incredible bracelet, and I was like, wow, I've never given this watch a second look in my life because of the movement. And then you see that, and I was like, wow, that is an incredibly gorgeous watch.
His was in white gold, right?
His is another level. But when you go down to the regular level, you're like, oh, I guess I didn't really notice how good that was.
Yes, 100%. And that's just natural and human, to not be the guy that realizes that something that isn't talked about is great. That's just normal.
Right.
But that is something that we should strive for, right? Generally, trying to basically like assess things on their merit, as opposed to their
give things
clout.
a second look. Exactly. Because this is the Omega Constellation F300 Hertz electric chronometer reference 198.0006.
Right.
I looked at it and I was just like, I don't want that movement. Like, that movement's going to be a pain to service. I don't know how long it will work. It hums. That's cool if I put it to my ear. But when you see someone wear it in context and when they have like a one-of-one example you never see before, you're like,
It starts to make a lot of sense.
Exactly. It's like, that does look good on your wrist.
100%.
Next up, this is what I am getting my girlfriend for her birthday.
Yep.
This is the JLC 8-day brass travel alarm clock. This is a nerdy thing to get.
Really, anything watch related for your house is weird, right? Like, it's the coolest thing.
Of course.
But you have to be really into watches to be like, I'm gonna get a travel clock. I'm gonna get a desk clock.
Exactly.
Right. I'm gonna spend money on this.
Next on this list, second to last thing here. This is I don't even want to say the Omega specifically. Getting a watch from the 20s with a porcelain dial. Typically with blue numbers or something like that. Some blue.
With those little hands.
Yeah, with those little weird hands. This is where the alpinist hands should be.
Yeah, right.
So this is pains to service, incredibly hard to service. It's not really worth it if you want to keep it working. Right. But if you want to have a beautiful watch on your wrist, you get something like that.
They're unbelievable watches. The quality of the watches as well. They're very, very small, so keep that in mind. But if you're wearing this watch, you're really into watches.
This is a different planet of watch. Yeah, that has an Omega logo on it. That's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, which makes it obviously much more expensive. But you can even get unbranded versions with these dials, and it's still, you can do it.
You know what the weirdest thing that they remind me of? That I want to have one specifically for this reason. They feel like a watch that I wear during Easter. Like very pale, very bright color. There's also something about it.
This is my Easter watch.
This is my Easter people. This is the most religious.
You're like, taxes are way too high, which I do feel, by the way.
Yeah, this is your Easter watch. No, but really, it's just that mixed in with the fact that it just feels like a picnic watch that you're wearing. It's such a weird watch. That's why I like it.
Wow. You go on picnics?
I used to go on picnics.
Yeah, you haven't
my
been on
girlfriend
one in a
moved
while?
away for 2 years.
No, I know, but now she's back. You'll go on a picnic again?
Yeah, 100%.
Wow, that really got me just now.
Really?
Yeah, it's such a cool thing to do.
Dude, I would
never take a girl on a picnic. I mean, like, unless I had like a real girlfriend. Yeah. Like, that's not something you could do with you know what I mean?
Because they'll start to like you too much.
Oh my God, I hate that. I hate when they like me.
You're like sweating.
I'm like, I'm gonna have to break up with you one day. Oh my God, this is horrible.
You don't like me.
Oh,
you just like this cheese spread. I bought an ex-girlfriend of mine a picnic basket once.
Like, I have this beautiful spread. She's like, wow, he must really like me. My sister whispers, he just really likes cheese and accoutrements.
The girl's like, also, why are you here?
She's my Secret Service.
Yeah. She's in full black with
She's explaining everything. That's it. He just is not representative of how much he likes you. Don't think there's any correlation. He just really likes Riette.
It was more of a food thing. He didn't want to eat in the park alone, but he really wanted to picnic. I bought my ex-girlfriend a picnic basket, filled it with the most beautiful book of poetry I've ever seen in my life, at a vintage bookshop. And the woman said, oh, this author, we actually found out, isn't really published. Like, he did this by himself in, like, the 50s.
Right.
Super cool. I gave her the gift. She says, thanks. I just really think that, like, if we wanted a picnic basket, it should have been something we picked out together. So I remember I was like, what?
Okay.
Bought her ice cream one day. She knocked on her door to surprise her. A different girl. She goes, she has a bowl of ice cream in her hand.
Oh my God.
She goes, I guess I'll put this back in the freezer.
Yes.
It's like, okay.
I guess you ought to.
Yeah. Last up on this list is the M95 movement series of Movado. Nothing to really say about it besides small, beautiful, and it has snake hands on the subdial.
These are great watches. This is funny. I think this is kind of one of the pits of being really into watches. Is I think that the 321s are better and they're cheaper, but these get more credit because they're
not 321s.
They're not 321s. So it's all, you know what I mean? Like it gets silly.
This is a harder find.
Right. But it's like, well, which one's I mean, they're both great. I don't know. I've never gotten into the Movado, the collectible Movado world. They're great, sure, but I just don't think that watch is worth what it costs.
The collectible Movado world is incredibly weird.
It is weird.
Because the brand now is nothing like what they used to be.
Yes,
like,
and I love the triple calendars. They're incredible. I definitely see the value there. But on these chronos, I pass.
I like the snake hands. I think that's cool.
Our biggest fan is wearing a zero cap right now, wearing a vintage Movado chronograph, and he's just crying.
He's just standing like this. Honey, you okay? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I hear they're talking about Movado. Uh-huh. Finally, the first time we did this, I was like, dude, I found this crazy brand you've never heard of. You pronounced it like it was your own name.
Kari Voutilainen.
Boom, baby. Yeah. This is the Starry Night Vine.
Cool.
The description I'm not going to read, but the first sentence is exactly what you'd expect. One of the greatest contemporary lacquer artists is ba 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 ba. Then that same sentence repeats about the dial, about the hands, about the case, about the bracelet, or the band. This is an unbelievably gorgeous watch.
This watch, and this is not unusual when you're talking about Kari Voutilainen at all. It is a convergence of just the greatest talent in the world.
Oh.
Like, that's it. Here you go. Here's a watch that's perfect. Whether you like it or not, it's a matter of personal taste, but the watch is basically perfect, so enjoy.
Every single hand that touched this watch did one thing, and they did it perfectly.
Yes.
One guy worked on the hands, another guy worked on the dial, another guy worked on the case. Okay, we're going to skip the craziest watch to talk about at the end because it would be one of my favorite watches if it wasn't what it is. But moving on, I want to talk about you because you're on this list.
Yeah,
I'm on in general.
Yes. So long story short, when you're really what category are we in? Like just like expert collector.
We're the highest category of this.
I'm not the highest category of collector. I'm probably a solid category or two categories below that because there's not just beginner, intermediate, and
of course.
It's a little bit more nuanced, and I'm definitely not at the top. But this one thing that I do definitely is at the top. Like,
and I will say to pump my man up, have been doing before it got trendy.
100%.
Yeah.
I have a very specific and happens to be not popular love for a particular class of watches, and pursuing that unpopular passion and putting your money where your mouth is, that's what experienced collectors do, right?
Yeah.
They say, I don't care that you don't like it. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me. And that is a great thing. And I do that. And here's a photo of some of my collection. And it is the most, this is completely one-dimensional.
All of your
in
watches
many ways
equal 40 millimeters in diameter.
Yeah, right, exactly.
All of them stacked next to each other.
Exactly. Like it's funny, but I love it. I got to this place where I kind of like almost I'm just so excited by like this category, and it's silly, and I know that because it's redundant, and my dad makes fun of me all the time for it.
Really?
Yeah, he's just like, you have another version of that. I'm like, but it's different because it's thicker. It's
right.
And I'm just really, really into it. And the reason I'm into it is because these are the kinds of watches that were, these are the kinds of watches you bought if you were successful living in the outer boroughs in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and all of the people that raised me, all the men that raised me, some of them were, but a lot of them weren't. But the point is, like, it was kind of a matter of whatever they did have looked like that, and whatever they wanted and didn't would have been that. So I've just kind of been like, I'll pick up the torch, and I'm going to continue this really beautiful little hobby in our family of collecting these ugly little gold watches, and they're my favorite. Like I took so few watches away with me on my trip recently, and it was 2 PHAs. It took 2 PHAs and a swatch.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. I loved it. And the PHAs are not expensive watches in the grand scheme of watch collecting.
Really?
People would be surprised to see them on my wrist, just on a financial level, because you would think I'd be like flexing with like a super expensive watch. That's like the thing.
Yeah.
Not at all. My PHA is like $6,000, and that's a lot of money, and I know that. But when it comes to like other
this
vintage,
list is $500,000.
other dealers,
watches.
They're wearing big watches. I'm wearing a little baby boy watch, in the grand scheme of watch collecting. So,
Really?
But that's a beautiful thing. And Piaget is not necessarily the greatest brand in the world. I don't mean that.
Of course.
But pursuing a nuanced and unusual and whatever passion in watch collecting, that is expert level.
Yeah, you've always liked stone dials. You've always liked enamel. I don't think you have an enamel watch. Have you ever owned one?
I have not. No, but I love them. They're just they're
right.
$100,000, and I'm just not there yet. But they're great as well. But I just love the finishing on the gold. I love the different dimensions. I love the thicknesses. I love the tapering. It's bizarre, and listen, there's now this episode's about gold watches, but as with all watches, there's like this dance that the designer is doing between being original original and then being tasteless. And that's an interesting thing too. The same thing that we do on the collecting end, they were doing on the designing end. So some things I look at and I'm like, that watch has no future. That is one bridge too far. I know there's a reason why that watch is unpopular.
Right.
So no, I will not buy that. Whereas my other watch, which may have the same gold weight value, is pretty much perfect in design. And that was undervalued. Yours isn't undervalued, mine is.
Yep.
It's kind of a funny thing.
Truly. So that makes the list. I'm going to skip one, but finally, Debatoon?
Yeah, I think Debatoon. Yeah.
Debatoon. The Dream Watch in general, but specifically the Meteorite one.
Yep.
This feels like an alien watch in like a sci-fi movie.
Yes.
This is not meant to be an everyday watch that you wear with a t-shirt or anything. It is what you wear at the top of the top level with a suit. It's a huge, incredibly loud watch, especially the silver one.
This is a great watch. It's a great watch. It's a beautiful, independent spirit. It's an individual way of looking at the world. This is the watch that you buy if you have a lot of money.
Yes.
And you are exactly like everyone else, but you want to communicate the message that you're nothing like anyone else.
Exactly.
Period.
Exactly. I think this is one of the greatest watches of all time. It is so weird looking.
Some guy's just going to kill himself right now. He's wearing his Debatoon and he's like, I am exactly like
Honey, they did not just mention Debatoon as well, did they? No, they did. Well, it sounded like they liked it. Well, no, one does. The other one, Theo, I think, does, but Harris doesn't. I think it's just such a creepy looking watch. That's why I like the same way that the enamel is also creepy because it's from the 20s. Or so the porcelain's also kind of creepy because it's like faded, super old and everything. I love that. And I wish it was smaller. I wish it was tiny.
It's a huge watch.
It is. Well, that's.
But you're right. Point. Could you imagine that watch small?
Oh
my God! Almost like a lady's watch.
Yeah,
that's my shit.
The whole point of this is to be seen.
Right.
I want it to be a cool, weird, everyday.
Like that watch, almost with crash proportions, obviously on its side.
Yes.
That is insane. That is a perfect watch.
Yes.
I agree.
And
that's a 70. I don't know how much this watch is. I have no idea. But,
I have no idea.
But I was going to say $75,000 because that's the price of a crash. But I would. The reason I was saying that was because this is not as popular of a brand. It's not as popular of a watch. This watch could be $300,000. I have no idea how much that watch is.
The Meteorite one is priceless, basically, but still. Well, just because I think they made one. But yeah, that would be nuts.
Yeah.
But that's a list.
That's a list. So that's beginner, intermediate, and advanced collector.
Cusping on advanced into insane. Yeah.
Exactly. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and like it. If you want more watch content, go ahead and subscribe to The Zero. Click down below. Again, podcasts weekly with experts. Michael comes on once a month. It's a great time. We're doing live chats tonight. Actually, not when you're watching this, when it's recording. But yeah, it's an incredible community. I hope to see you on over there. And if I do, shoot me a DM. See you then. If you love watches like I do, if you think that they mean something more than the time, then head on over to theoandharris.com and shop our selection of vintage watches and handmade straps. They're unique and they're special, and once they're gone for good.